I'm so happy to be again on this BLF, which is one of the finest literature festivals uh, conducted in India, which gives a space for regional writing. This is very important as an Indian writer and as a reader who is living in India. Because the Indianness of all the writings, all the works produced in India, I strongly believe that rely on the regional experience we cherish or we experience. And here, one of the senior writers in Hindi who has written some of very, very striking, remarkable novels in Hindi is with us, Geetanjali Shree. And I am supposed to be in conversation with her, comparing and contrasting our writings, as I too write in a regional language, Malayalam, and living in the southern state of Kerala. So she's my Didi, and it is kind of a pleasure to be with her on the same stage, because ever since I saw her first, I had adored her, the way she conducts herself on the stage and off the stage. And so it is such a pleasure for a junior writer like me to be with her. So we are to talk about the hearts break in the families. I shall start with an experience of mine. When my first story was published in 2001, one of my colleagues, I was working as a journalist those days, and one of my colleagues sent me an email saying that I don't read women's writing at all, because all their stories start in the kitchen and ends in the veranda. This was kind of a revelation, no? That women can write those stories which start in the kitchen, which is a big metaphor, and end in the veranda. Doesn't it describes the kind of life we still attribute to writers who are women? What do you think about that, Didi? Because some of your finest writings have very striking lines like, walls can hear but they can't talk.
Well, thank you, Meera. I think the example you give of what the response to your story was is a very telling one. And I think it shows a very popular prejudice that people continue to have towards writing by women. But I also think that women writers have very successfully turned that metaphor completely on its head and shown how it may be from the kitchen to the veranda, but everything is happening in the kitchen to the veranda. So there's no such binary any longer between home and the world, where you think important things are happening outside and, home is about very domesticated things. No, it's not such a binary, and very important things are happening in both places, and women writers have shown that very well, I think, in all these years. So for me, and as we all know, it's little things that make a story, and those little stories sometimes have huge reverberations. They have huge implications, political and otherwise. So whatever, it doesn't matter. I think it's unimportant any longer whether it's about the kitchen or about the veranda or about, in Sabrimala. I think those stories have the entire range, in their sweep. As for me, I always get a little disturbed with the epithet woman writer. So it's like some kind of a battle inside me. Of course, I am a woman and I am a writer, but I don't want to be, labeled.
It only means that by default, writers have to be men.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm sort of always a little uneasy with this one. I don't want to start justifying it this way and that. But yes, I mean, we have an identity as a writer and we have an identity as a woman. And often, these enrich each other. And I've read a lot of your work and I admire it very much. I mean, I know that invariably women come into it, invariably themes of home come into it, and heartbreak in homes come into it. If it comes to that, in a way, home is synonymous with heartbreak. There's so much emotion floating in a home that it's always...
But I think all good writings come from heartbreaks.
Heartbreak, well, yes, and high emotion, so it's always heartbreak, whether of, the highs and the lows, they just are always...
And the heartbreaks shouldn't be kind of familial, because it can be political as well.
Of course, but I think these things are linked always. Of course, talking about you, I think, or remembering things that you've written, I think, or what you say, that you write, for you writing is a revenge, you say. And you also say that being a woman is a condition, isn't that so? So it's almost like you can't tear your skin away from you. It is something which is there and you have to deal with it all the time, and you deal with it with revenge, you say, which I find very interesting, because I think my whole attempt is to be as detached as possible, as distant as possible, and from that distance I think my writing finds its way back into emotions. But I do try, to keep very calm and cool and write. While I think you write with it must be quite a strain to write with so much passion and maintain that level of passion. In your book, which I read recently, The Poison of Love, I was very struck by the tone of it, which is quite frenzied. And when I started it, I thought this could very much be such a woman, the prejudiced woman novel. It's about love, it's about revenge, and it's about disappointment in love. It's about Meera. It's another interpretation of Meera and her love for Krishna and her and her rejection by her husband. But it was amazing the way you just transported it to some other level with this passion, with this sense of revenge, in you. And I remembered actually a painter, a lot of you might know, Neelima Sheikh, who's one of our finest painters. And when she started painting, she was doing these very delicate things, which were considered very womanly. And she turned that metaphor into something much larger than what it appears, and turned, therefore, the metaphor of the woman and the feminine on its head. And I think you are doing something similar, and I absolutely loved that book.
Thank you so much, because those words mean a lot to me. But do you think that, or don't you think that the families play a very important role in shaping a writer? Because the worse the family is, the best the writings would be. Don't you think so?
Well, certainly. I think families are very rich, disturbing sight, where it's a microcosm where the whole world is playing itself out. So I have absolutely no problems in writing being limited to the locale of the family, because I think everything is possible from within the family. It's a metaphor for everything that's happening in the world. So really, of course, family is very enriching, very oppressive, very heartbreaking, and constantly reinventing itself and rejuvenating itself.
I'm not mentioning people, the individuals, the family members as individuals would be very good persons. But when they come under the same roof, the kind of space they allot to a writer on whom they want to exercise some control, there comes the problem, I think.
Yeah.
Don't you think so as a writer? When your husband, when your children, when your mother, when your sister demand so much of inner space, it will be very difficult for a writer to be a good mother or wife or daughter or a sister.
Well, I think that is the dilemma we are always negotiating as writers, because family demands of us different kinds of roles, while the writer demands of us certain getting away from everything, rejecting everything and being in solitude. So they're completely opposing demands, and we are negotiating that all the time. There's a writer in Hindi who said that women are pressure cooker writers, that they write between the whistles of the pressure cooker, but I think that perhaps even that women have turned to their advantage, and it gives their writing a certain tonality which is completely theirs. I must.
So once I was, while I was quarreling with my husband, while I was writing Hangwoman, I told him I shouldn't have married if ever I know that I had to write such a novel. So he asked me, then why did you marry? I said, it's only because I married that I could write this novel, because only because I married and I got an opportunity to have an insight into this life that I could write so much. So bad marriages or bad experiences maybe give us good stories. And I was really impressed when I read in Geetanjali Shree's Empty Space these lines: we lead a life which is not ours, and a life leads us to which we don't belong. One that will not own us, one that we will not owe. That's so self-explanatory. Can you read from your Empty Space so that we'll get a fair idea of what we are talking about?
Well, thank you, Meera. Actually, reading out of my work is what I like most to do. I don't particularly want to analyze my own work or my mind and heart. And I think my pehchan is my writing. My only problem is I don't know how to hold the mic and read. So let me try. No. I'll do that. I have to tell you very briefly what this novel is about. It's called The Empty Space, Khali Jagah in Hindi. It's a novel about a family which is caught in a terrorist disaster. A bomb blast goes off in a cafe, in a university cafe where young boys and girls had collected on the day of admission to the university. It was considered hitherto a safe cafe. So a bomb blast, a terrorist plants a bomb there, and the cafe is just blown apart, and everybody is killed, except miraculously one tiny space the size of a 3-year-old is left intact, and there is a 3-year-old in that, who is taken away by one of the mothers who has lost her 18-year-old in that bomb blast. And this child is the narrator of this novel, and his is the life which is neither his life nor of the person departed, nor of the child departed, and his life which is of the child departed and his own. So it's like a loss of self, and it's like a family caught in something momentous which takes away from it the possibility of an ordinary, happy human life which all of us covet. So I just want to read out a scene, if you'll allow me, and be patient, not very long, in fact quite short, which is where the mothers go to the burnt down cafe to identify any remains or any signs of their child. But there's always need for Ma. Father collects the ashes in his palms. Mother recognizes the pieces. Ma knows which button she had sewn on to which shirt. She knows, not father. And she knows exactly how low the drawstring on his pajama had hung, that she had wound round a pencil to tuck into its waistband. And this is the pocket into which she had slipped the good luck toffee. If only he had popped it into his mouth, wouldn't her motherly blessings have evaporated the bomb before it could explode? It was the mothers, not the police, who finally completed the job. They landed up, all the mothers who had sent off their children for higher studies so that they could take on the world. They landed up to tell apart idli from heart, gulab jamun from intestine, from kidney, from liver. What was that in the ashes? A bit of idli fluffed in steam, or the guts of her child, warmed and stirred with her lifeblood. They came in buses and cars, the mothers, past burnt-out factories, burnt-out shops, past blackened skeletons of buses, past every revealing sign, all the way up to the cafe. The cafe was burnt down completely when the women arrived, their tears and sobs frozen. Sky azure, the sun bright, the mothers like beams of brilliance descending not from buses, but from somewhere higher up. Life is an epic, and every expression is a sign, every atom a significant portent. The cafe was now suddenly in a sensitive area. Rioters amok in the city. The cafe a magnet for danger. Like a band of disciplined terrorists, the women surrounded the cafe. The police on guard stepped back in awe. As the women set foot in the cafe, the sky darkened, clouds gathered and thunder rolled, thunder and torrential rain. Every single thing a sign, every atom adding up to a tale. No one came any longer to the cafe. Even ghosts crave ambiguous flickers of shade and light, but nothing ambiguous about the clear black soot of the cafe. Only soot, the scent, soot, vision, soot, silence, soot, the floor, soot, the air, soot, the roof, soot, the past, soot, the button she had sewed on, the pajama string she had wound in. The mother's feet floated by a hair's breadth of mother love above the burnt floor. Their scorched glances swept the cafe. Their feet would not descend. Who knew where, on whom? Gently they began to glide. And as they opened the doors of the burnt metal cupboards, shadows of smoke and ash floated out and curled around them. Soot rose from the depths of the floor, its tendrils curling up, kissing their floating feet. In the devastated cafe, ash swirled around the floating mothers, flickering soft as candles, searching. Here is my child. Here and here. And this is how Ma was floating when, by a hair's breadth of mother love under her feet, she sensed a bit of space in which a 3-year-old could just fit. No ash flew up from there, and gently Ma lowered her feet.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, I think we can open for the question and answer.
I like how you demarcated the line between how she writes as a form of revenge and you with a lot of reflection. At the same time, I feel that even two forms of writing are quite interlinked because a lot of reflection comes from the revenge that you're talking about. So, can you just explain more on that? When we talk about women characters, then one is the perception which comes from the readers, and one is the way the author is explaining. So, how far can they appeal to both the genres while you are writing? So, two things.
Well, first, a clarification. I never said that someone who's writing with revenge, and Meera in particular, is writing without reflection. Never that. I'm talking of a certain mood and tonality which her writing with passion and anger and revenge creates. While I also have anger and distress and all the rest, I hope. But my whole attempt, for whatever reason, is to write in a tone which is calm rather than in a tone which is frenzied. So I don't know, I mean, these are different choices about expression. It was not to say that I'm a very reflective writer and she is somebody who's just doing it in an impetuous manner, not at all. So we're absolutely, you're right, we are the same, And the second question, well, a writer, has no monopoly over what she writes and what the meaning of those words are. Maybe the writer also does not often know the full possible meaning. I mean, it's nothing which is watertight and complete. So certainly a writer would write with a certain intention and a certain meaning which may be read completely differently by every single reader. And it's a very well-known truism that, every time you read, you are creating another book. And the writer has to be prepared for that. Once the child has been born, the child is out there in the world and, will grow up with its own meanings and character and so on and so forth. So it is a very fluid thing. Text is a very, very fluid thing, and I think that is the fun and wonder and beauty and everything of it. Yeah. I mean, I think no writer worth his or her salt would want to write something which can only be understood in this particular way and no other way. I mean, that would be somebody extremely limited.
Can I add a sentence to that? Because I just wanted to explain why I said writing is my revenge and why I wrote about revenge in my stories. Because I was so bored of reading women characters who are so kind, so obedient, so loving, so caring. I just wanted to write about women who are vehement. And I think I should write more about them.
More questions?
No more questions?
Good evening, ma'am. Ma'am, I have read a lot of your works, and although I have read your heartbreak stories a lot, I'm more of a fan of your political writing, especially Bhagavan Marnam. So I wanted to know, because we are talking about women and writers who are women, I want to know, has you being a woman or your identity as a woman affected your political writing in any way?
In every way. In every way. Because only because I happen to be born as a woman, that I could understand how it feels like being an oppressed, suppressed, a lower caste, a transgender person, a marginalized person in every way. I think I owe a lot to my life as a woman in this country, in this society.